Hey there, everyone. Before we get started on this podcast, it's time for a big congratulations on behalf of the entire admissions staff to the class of 2025 first-year admitted students. Yay! Now that you're officially in, it's time to dive into all that USC and the Viterbi School of Engineering have to offer. Starting March 31st and continuing throughout April, we're hosting 6 exclusive on-campus events. So choose a weekend or weekday that works for you. And if you're not able to visit campus, that's no problem. Our admission team is hitting the road with events in over 15 locations, both domestic and international, to connect with you where you are. For all the details and registration links, visit viterbi.link/admit events. That's viterbi.link, LINK/admit events, ADMITEVENTS. Don't miss out.
This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Viterbi Voices podcast. I'm your co-host, Safia Patel. I'm a senior studying computer science and doing my master's in engineering management. Today, unfortunately, Paul is busy running around campus with some Explore events that we have, which all of you should try coming to, especially our newly admitted students. But I do have a lovely new co-host with me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. So my name is Keilani. I am a current sophomore transfer student studying computer science and business administration. I am from Ventura, California, so I'm fairly local to Los Angeles, and yeah.
Tell the people what you're involved in on campus.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I am involved in the podcast and data sections of the Daily Trojan, which is our only mainstream student-run publication on campus. I am also a part of the interactives desk at Annenberg Media, so I help with a lot of the web design. And I am also a part of the multimedia team for one of our cultural magazines called Scene. And finally, I am an editor, soon to be substantive editor for our student publication focusing on math and science called The Nucleus.
That's like, as a transfer, that's crazy. Like, you do a lot.
Yeah.
How was it adjusting as a sophomore transfer?
As a sophomore transfer, I felt my adjustment was relatively okay. Last semester was very chill because I only had 2 GEs and 2 major classes, and it was very easy. I had Fridays off, and I wasn't nearly as involved as I am now.
Yeah.
But this semester kind of took a different turn. But because I was already here for 1 semester, it was a lot more manageable than if I had just went into it straight. But it's all about just like allocating your time appropriately and stuff like that, and looking at your schedule, seeing when you're available and fitting things in where they can fit. So it sounds hard on paper, but once you do it, it's okay.
Yeah, even today when we were talking to the new students, a lot of them were asking about time management, like balancing your social life with your academic life. And
it's
like,
doable.
It's definitely doable, but also like, don't get scared if you don't figure it out right away, because everyone's like, oh, it gets easier, don't worry. But then one thing we always say is like, it doesn't necessarily get easier. You just like learn.
You get better at it.
Yeah, you get better at it. You adapt, you assimilate. Like it'll get better with time. Just because you're like used to it at that point.
For sure.
And it's awesome that you're transitioning so quickly. Like I feel like I'm also a sophomore transfer, and it took me a minute to get acquainted just because of how much was going on. Like
there is a lot.
Yeah, and like balancing everything that you want to like.
For sure.
Awesome. We're gonna keep this intro a little bit of the shorter side. But Keilani, do you want to tell the audience what episode you're bringing us today?
Of course. So the episode today is focusing on journalism and its intersectionality with engineering as a discipline in general. And the guest today is a freshman studying computer science, Ellis. And pretty much we just went into the information crisis involving especially larger media, and its impact on society, and how we can use journalism as a tool to make science and engineering, especially with somewhat of an emphasis on sustainability, more accessible, so that people are getting the right information that they need. And so that way they're also a little less intimidated when approaching something as big and broad as engineering, because the main way that they can get access to that is through our communications. We need to make the communications a lot more accessible to them and also simultaneously factually correct. And that way more people will want to get encouraged and get involved and actually care about the issues in our world. And it'll make engineering as a discipline a lot more accessible and easy to them as well.
That's awesome. I'm gonna hand the mic right back to you and jump right into this lovely episode.
Awesome. All right, so here we have Ellis from Viterbi, and she's going to come on here, and we're just going to talk about the intersectionality and overlap of journalism and engineering and the underlooked significance of that. So, Ellis, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, go for it.
Yeah. My name is Ellis. I'm a current freshman at USC, and my major is computer science. And I'm involved in computer science, but I'm also a writer for The Nucleus, which is a scientific publication on campus, which aims to make science news accessible for people who are not as involved in the science realm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, I'm Keilani. I am studying computer science and business administration here in Viterbi. And I'm also a part of the Nucleus as an editor. And that was largely one of the reasons why I wanted to do a podcast on this specific topic, because I noticed that the Nucleus focused primarily on the science and math and engineering aspect in the form of a digestible and accessible student publication. And to me, that is like a very specific, like I guess niche, you could say. So yeah, and really wanted to explore that today for sure. So I wanted to start off by asking you if you did any journalism at all in high school, or if you just decided in college, like, oh, like I really want to do this, I guess. And if you're involved with anything else journalism related, but like just your general journalism experience up until now, I guess.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I knew I really liked writing, and I knew I was really interested in science, in particular sustainability.
Awesome.
And so early on in high school, I ran a newsletter that was basically focused on local sustainability efforts, and it was meant to be kind of hopeful about sustainability. And even though I was like, the goal was to get short little articles about sustainability out to the school, I gained a lot from it because I was just able to learn about so many more fields. And the act of, I think, writing about something, you build a little bit of a relationship with it.
Oh, for
And so for
sure.
me to be writing about so many different pieces of sustainability, I think that actually like helped me grow a lot in that area, because I had like this relationship and I cared about that kind of news. And I like, in addition to that, which was a very brief part of high school, I have very much been interested in specifically like science communication, because I consume a lot of like podcasts or just like, YouTube channels of like, okay, specific science content. And that's been really interesting to me, is like how, as a kid, kids love watching like Magic School Bus and Bill Nye. And then what happens to that type of, communication when people become that type of like making science accessible, that type of media to adults. And so I think coming into college, I was really interested in getting involved in some type of science communication. So yeah.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's so cool. No, yeah, like I feel kind of similar in a sense, because I actually didn't I didn't really participate in any like publications at all when I was in high school. I was just strings kid. But we did have a student
Yep.
paper, and like journalism was offered as a class, but like I just like I don't know. That's one of my regrets in high school
Oh,
though, was not taking up journalism. But yeah, when I got to USC, I was like, oh, like there are so many cool like student run publications on campus that like pretty much anyone can join. And I was like, wait, that's like really, really cool. And then I found the Nucleus and like shameless plug for the Nucleus, but I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like everything ever. And like I feel like science communications in
Yes.
general is like just super, I guess, underlooked and almost underappreciated.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I thought that like spotlighting that today would be just a really cool and insightful idea. And the nice thing too is that like I feel like it's generally easy to get involved. I don't know if you would agree,
mm,
but like
yeah.
it's super like welcoming and like even if you don't have any real like I didn't exactly have any like super concrete journalism experience until I got to college, but it's like they're just so welcoming and they just like bring you in. They're like, "Hey, like do you want to
Yes.
edit this? You want to write this?" And it's just like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." And you definitely have a lot of freedom to uh so it's
Mm,
like it's really really nice for sure. And then yeah, so like in college like now because you already like had that foundation in high school like going into college did you like in terms of like your current journalism involvement with the Nucleus and stuff like how did you discover it like kind of like and like just like seeing it kind of compelled you to want to continue kind of what you started doing in high school a little bit.
Hey everyone, it's Brooke here. This message is for all our awesome high school juniors or even younger students out there that are curious about what the Viterbi School of Engineering is all about. We've got a great opportunity for you. Our on-campus Visit Viterbi experience sessions are the best way to get to know more about our programs. It's a 90-minute session focused on first-year applicants. It includes an overview of our academic programs and admission process led by one of our very own USC Viterbi admission counselors. To get more information and to register, visit our webpage, viterbi.link/events, viterbi.link/events, EVENTS. We can't wait to meet you.
yeah. I mean, my first semester, the I was not able to go to the club fairs. I had a mandatory class that like took up that time. But
Hmm.
so I think, but made a list of everything I wanted to do, and I knew like science communication was something I really just wanted to try at least for a little bit. And so I went through the list of all of the RSOs, like looking for like, okay,
Oh,
like
like the website
just
and
some kind
stuff.
of publication I could get involved with because I knew that was something I really wanted to do.
For sure.
And I like fully agree with you. Like it's so needed. And so it was really easy and like to get involved. They just want more people to be excited about science and about sharing science. And
Absolutely.
so I think it was like a super awesome, like and welcoming group. And I knew that it was something that I was like particularly interested in.
For sure, for sure. No, yeah, that's really, really cool. And yeah, I know that you kind of already got into it a little bit, but if you could talk about your current like what your current journalistic pursuits, I guess, like both in and outside of the Nucleus, if you are working on stuff outside of the Nucleus, like I guess just like yeah, what you're currently working on, I suppose.
Yeah. As of right now, I've really only been involved in the nucleus. I
Mhm.
would love to get involved in more kind of podcast style. I feel like that's a lot like super personable.
For
Um
sure.
and like I but in particular my like with the nucleus, I've been really focusing on environmental topics because those are what's particularly interesting to me. But like I'm really interested in like both thinking about things in terms of hope and something that can be made interesting. I think right now there's a lot of like ways to engage in environmental content and then just leave feeling like, okay, I'm depressed, like
No,
the
yeah,
world
that's
is
so
falling
real.
apart. And
Right.
I don't really think that you can ever like mobilize people towards a cause through just kind of fear. I think that
Mhm.
like really kind of instilling some kind of like, oh, that's actually really cool. Um, when it comes to any kind of science or anything is how you like inspire people to get involved in some way.
For
And
sure.
so
Sure.
in the articles that I've done, so I just did one on though that just came out how this amphibian fungal chytrid, which is like this like fungal disease that's killing a lot of frogs and amphibians around the world. There's hope in figuring out how to mitigate the effects of it. And I had a lot of fun writing it, like really thinking about how to be engaging and how to be kind of incorporate some kind of humor or levity and make it really interesting and also hopeful. So that's, I think, been my goals when it comes to journalism and writing, like thinking about how, like, what is writing about environmentalism, but then walking away with some kind of like, oh, that's really cool or that's awesome instead of like feeling sad.
No, yeah, that's no, that's brilliant, honestly. I feel like in general, because like generally speaking, I feel like a lot of people have a very negative stigma when it comes to news in general for a variety of reasons. And a lot of them, like, honestly, are pretty warranted just because it's like, oh, like, I look at the news and like I also want to continue with science communications and can see myself pursuing it as a career in some aspect, but it's also like being overwhelmed with so much
Ah.
information, especially like when you're like doing research and you're the one to deliver the information as well.
Hmm.
There can be kind of, especially if you're trying to be super like unbiased about it and trying not to let like the negative emotion like empower or like or overpower um like the topic at hand and having that not show in your writing. It's a very like fine line, like teeter, like I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it can be a lot and it can be overwhelming, but I really love that like you kind of want to take sort of like a more what's the word? Like definitely a more like optimistic approach about it, and it's like okay, like this is what's going on and stuff, and like yeah, it's like scary, but like we don't have to be afraid of it entirely because here's some like this is what we can do, especially like the activism aspect about it. Because I feel like
Yeah.
some news, like in general, like even though it is information and that's kind of like the point, when we're presented information and it's just the information, it's just like, okay, well, like, what do I do with this? Like, I feel worse now that I like saw
Hmm.
this than before. Um, and I guess like ignorance is bliss in a way.
Hmm.
But I think that's a really like that's more of that is needed for sure in today's society. But I am curious though, because you mentioned that you've primarily in high school, you ran your newsletter that focused on sustainability, but you're doing CS here on campus, correct?
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool. Did you consider like any sort of like environmental, like pursuing that at all? Or like how do you think you're gonna like, I guess, incorporate CS into it?
No, that's a really good question. I think that it's something that I've thought a lot about because if I was not pursuing CS, I would definitely be in environmental science or environmental studies.
Hmm.
But I do really think and believe that like humanity in general, like computers are really one of our best tools that we've
For sure.
created. And the fact that this environmental crisis is like very much, I think, one of the most pressing or threats like that are that
Yeah.
to mankind. I
Hmm.
think that why not apply that tool to kind of mitigate these effects? And so
Hmm.
I'm hoping that I can be involved in like simulations or like working with data for climate, because that is like can be so important, thinking
That's
about like
awesome.
forecasting weather or forecasting like the impacts of climate change, or if
Yeah,
we build, a building that's right here, what does that do to the local environment?
right.
Um, and those types of models, I think, are really, really useful. And there's just so many different ways that I've been learning that computers can be applied. So I don't think that anything exists in the vacuum. Everything is overlapping and
Right.
intersecting. But I think that that was my motivation for going into computer science, of figuring out, okay, how can I develop the skills to use this tool that I can then apply towards this issue that I'm really passionate about.
No, that's really awesome. I feel like you're like the first person in my life that I've encountered who's like mentioned in CS who's mentioned any degree of concern about like the environment at all, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
I feel like in my mind, I've always made this joke, and it's like it's such a stupid joke, but it's like, oh, like I am going into a career that is quote unquote destroying the environment
Hmm.
in some way, given the current industry practices and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Especially, I mean, I'm considering going into AI, but like people like just now realizing more recently the environmental impacts on AI. And I thought to my like it was a passing thought of like I want to still pursue this industry and like see what I can do within it, but it's like one of those things is like how can this be made more sustainable but still economically profitable and socially profitable at the same time?
Mm.
Because it can be done for sure. I do believe it can be done, but it's just a matter of doing it, I guess, and then getting more people to be on board with that, because that's also another issue that I feel like is kind of underlooked in CS. I know that there are
Mm.
some like companies out there who have stated like, oh, we're going to be more like environmentally friendly, and we're reducing the carbon emissions, and we're doing this and this. But I mean, it's also just a matter of like whatever corporate social responsibility is saying versus what is actually being done, especially like from a marketing standpoint to a consumer. And then it's like, well, science communications is like kind of the gateway into that marketing aspect so that people can visibly see and understand and also see the results of like having an environment that is thriving and growing so that we're not exponentially destroying it. um but
No, I agree so fully. I mean, I feel like, especially when you have people, I think it like the current way that college is set up, you kind of are trained in a vacuum. So for
yeah, that's true.
engineers, they're so engaged in engineering and like,
Mhm.
okay, how to optimize this process. You're not thinking about, well, what are the effects of it?
For
And
sure,
there's
especially with
like,
AI and stuff like ChatGPT and
yeah.
everything.
And I think you're right. Like that is why communication is so important. I mean, I think Carl Sagan who popularized the idea of like a nuclear winter during the
Oh
Cold War,
wow.
and that like totally changed public perceptions on the Cold War.
Hmm.
But he was a science communicator, and Rachel Carson, I mean, the same thing that she did, where Silent Spring was like geared towards the public to read, and by like engaging the public in that conversation of, okay, companies are profit motivated, that's the way that things are, but if you can talk to the public and make them care about something, then the public can impact policy. And so like
True.
Rachel Carson Silent Spring is pretty much responsible for like the government banning of DDT and certain pesticides. And that
Wow.
was because she was like engaged, like had this background and had the science background where she was learning about this. But then instead of just publishing, and I think I'm I might be wrong about this, but I think she had tried to submit to magazines and she wasn't able to because she was a woman. And so she
Mhm.
decided, okay, I'm going to write a 400-page book and people are going to know.
Yeah.
And in doing that, using her background to educate the public, that really did have a pretty substantial impact.
No, yeah, for sure. And it's like, and like with that, like, and it also kind of just like poses the greater like issue. I mean, even though that was like back then, that doesn't mean that those boundaries don't exist now, because some of them
Hmm.
still very much do. But just the boundary of even just like, yeah, just having your work out there and having your work published, especially in an age where information is so incredibly saturated and
Hmm.
it's immediately available, like at all times pretty much. But it's like sometimes as like on paper, as efficient as that sounds, like from a research standpoint, I guess, and from just in general, it can still kind of be counterintuitive just because we're kind of in an information crisis right now, and we
Yeah.
have been, for a variety of reasons. So it's like people, I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier that we mentioned like the news is depressing. Like it is. I love what I'm doing with my current publications involvements, and I think it's really fun. I feel like it's something I can see myself doing in the long term, especially with the intersection with engineering and STEM in general. But like, oh my gosh, like I get so like constantly like I don't know. I get so depressed sometimes. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like this is horrible."
Hmm.
This is horrible. And like because it is. And not always, but it's yeah. And so it's like I feel like not only is it can be just super depressing in general, to constantly receive information that typically is not great, most of the time from a mainstream perspective, but also like people tend to and like I've been guilty of this as well, and it's kind of by design. Like if you're online, and like you get if people get their information largely from social media, the algorithm is designed such that they receive like only what is catered to them, I guess.
Hmm.
So there is very limited opportunity for external perspectives, and significantly reduces the ability of critical thinking. Um,
Hmm.
and a lot of like, and even like my mom will like say something, just like a random stat or number, and like, or like she'll show it to me, and it's just like, but she didn't like actually evaluate what it like means. And it's like, I've been guilty of that too, because it's just so easy to fall into that habit. But at that point, it kind of does feel like sort of like like an echo chamber of information. And it's either extremely upsetting, so we constantly get depressed because it's so like in our face all the time, and it's really hard to avoid, or it can be, unless you like completely cut off that like aspect. Or if you do completely cut off that aspect, then it's kind of harder to stay up to date with relevant information. So people may or may not be educated when they should or shouldn't be. So
Hmm.
it's like it's yeah, and that's definitely something that needs to be said about mainstream media in general. But I feel like it kind of put us into this information void, and like how, especially with social media, misinformation is so like easily spread. But and like I kind of like thought of that and like compared it to engineering as a discipline in general, because I feel like every time I tell people I do engineering, they're all like, "Oh my gosh, you must be so smart. I can't do what you're doing." And I'm like, "Oh, well, okay. I don't know if you've gotten that before." um, but I'm like, "Oh, well, thank you, but it's yeah, like I don't know, but but
No, it's different types of skill sets, like
sure,
engineers, we can maybe do a lot of math, but, especially because you're so focused on that math, there's maybe like less critical thinking practiced.
sure.
And, that's, well, a skill that,
Uh,
humanities majors are definitely involved in.
for
And
sure.
like, I think that's the whole purpose of like interdisciplinary or working with different like people from different backgrounds of like we're all contributing to something. It doesn't need to exist in a void.
Absolutely. And it's like none of these skills are ever mutually exclusive either. And like I feel like the kind of general engineering like I guess stereotype is like, yeah, very math, science, technical, skill heavy. You live in the lab, you never leave, no social
Hmm.
life. And it's like, I mean, at least here, like that is proven to be untrue in a lot of aspects, but it's like, yeah, so like to hear something like journalism, like anytime I tell people that I'm involved with student publications and stuff, they get surprised. They're like, how do you how do you do engineering and like that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do because it's fun. Um, but but yeah, so like with that being said, like people tend to be intimidated by engineering as an academic discipline in general. And some people might think that they're not good enough or like not smart enough, like for engineering. Um, but that could also just be due to a disconnect with the accessible communications with it because it is intimidating. I was scared. In your opinion, how do you think journalism and communications in general can like kind of ease that intimidation a little bit and get people
Hmm.
to like want, I mean, I've already kind of been talking about this, but like getting more people to care about problems in engineering, especially if they think it's like too beyond them, so they don't even try to understand it. Like how do you think like we can kind of overcome that information barrier and get people more involved through journalism, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's I think things are really tricky right now when it comes to social media because a lot of our media consumption has become short-term content, and
That's
that makes it
true.
really, really difficult to um, convey nuance. I mean, you can't really express a whole issue in a minute-long video.
Hmm.
And additionally, like if the algorithm says that a certain issue is out, then people aren't exposed to that.
That's
But when
true.
I and so I'm not. I think that's something that like is going to change like the way we or is changing the way we interact with media a lot. But I also know that when it comes to people feeling like a certain field isn't their area of expertise, like, and so then they don't even try, like, I do think it has to come back to writers pulling in from all different, um, I guess, styles of writing or at like making it not just accessible but interesting to so many people. So,
Hmm.
for example, when I remember the book that got me involved and interested in the environment totally was um, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she's an indigenous botanist. And so she writes about, like, okay, the science that she has from and the mechanisms of the way that plants and ecosystems interact that she has from her botany degree, but also she writes about her connection to the land that she understands from her indigenous perspective.
Hmm.
And but when I got that book, I received it. My mom got it for me when I was 12, and I
Oh,
looked on the back and I was like, okay, it's about indigenous history and environmentalism. Like, what two things could be more depressing? And
right.
I was like, I'm not going to do this, and I put it on the bookshelf for years until I was in high school and picked it up again. And but the way that she writes, it's about she uses so much prose and history, and there's personal narrative, and there's the science piece. And I think that anybody reading a book like this that has so many different elements of style is something that anybody can appreciate, or even natural history and regular history, and it was so fascinating to me, and I'd never read anything like it, where when I'd interacted with science media, it felt very, okay, I'm just going to explain the science to you, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And for her to incorporate this memoir and her relationship to land and prose that was just, it's so beautiful, I think got me more excited about the environment of this is something that's beautiful. And in the same way, I mean, I think a lot of the really successful pop science books or books that talk about science issues do that same thing, where the author might incorporate a memoir, or they might talk about, okay, the background of the scientists who did the science. And in doing that, it makes it so much more engaging. And I think that that also makes it more accessible to somebody where maybe they're not, okay, just reading a book about, it doesn't feel like a paper, it feels like a narrative.
Right.
And even though it does explain the science, it helps them get over that boundary
Sure.
of, oh, I wouldn't engage with this, or I'm just not interested in science. I'm just not interested in math. And in reality, it's all about how it's being communicated. And it's the same way as the teacher who you loved in like the most impactful teachers are the ones who really love what they're teaching, because you can see that they're excited about it, and it makes you excited about it. And, two different people can have wildly different experiences in a biology class, depending on whether or not their teacher was bored.
True. Absolutely.
And so I feel like, to answer your question, as people to answer your question about like how to get over these like invisible boundaries we've defined ourselves of, I'm an engineer, I wouldn't enjoy that book, or I'm not an engineer, I wouldn't enjoy that. And so I think it comes down to really incorporating something that anybody would enjoy to help people kind of get over these invisible boundaries, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really great take, honestly. Because well, because you said like you at first you are like, oh, I don't want to read this because this is like this looks too like depressing. You're like, I don't need all that right now. But then you like later, like you came around and you're like, oh wait, it was like those rhetorical moves and choices, and also more importantly, the sentimentality behind it that was like that got you to care. It was like, also because like someone else cared about it and it was expressed like I mean, I have not read this book, but like I'm just reiterating like my understanding of what you had just said of like, oh, like the this like it's like okay, like the earth's on fire. Okay, yeah, great. We've been new. Awesome. And then like I mean, it's not awesome, obviously, but it's like but then like it's really like that rawness too, like the rawness and the emotion behind it. And like especially like how it's conveyed like artistically and stuff and like
Mm-hmm.
as a writer that it's like, oh, but like this is actually like you like we should care about this like in general but that I think
Yeah.
that's a really great like gateway to a field to two fields I guess that are kind of like considered like I don't know sort of devoid of emotion. If anything, we need more of that to get the point across because that's just how much more important it is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, if you're surrounded by it, it is hard to be surrounded by all of this bad news. And, maybe it's her responsibility to communicate it, but it doesn't it it's difficult, and it's really hard to, your job is to communicate about some crisis and some issue, and then all you're thinking about is this issue, and it can be really taxing. And so I think for writers to also work on really establishing that a relationship of love with
Oh,
what they're writing
absolutely.
about.
For
I mean,
sure.
I'm thinking like for the LA fires, like for example, if the people who are able to respond the most are the ones who are doing it because they love the forest and because like they, love their communities and not as like, okay, this is depressing and awful. Because if you're motivated by some kind of love and building a community and saving and getting joy out of saving the things that bring you joy, then that makes it a lot more resilient to than the burden of just being surrounded by bad news.
Oh, absolutely. And like, and there are definitely like, I mean, here, obviously, like every USC student is required to take a lower division and an upper division writing course, no matter what. But yeah, like I guess just more of that, like especially with like engineers too, because it's like, yeah, like we need to learn how to, like if we're doing research on something, we need to learn how to properly write a publication, but it's also like yes, there's that technical aspect and like how to communicate the research you're doing, but then there's also another aspect of like, this is the research that I'm doing. It may not make sense to everyone on paper, so kind of like condensing, not necessarily condensing it, but just manipulating the already existing information to be in a way that's like, okay, well, this is how it's going to be more like important to the general public and just
Mm-hmm.
the greater good, especially with something as broad as the environment too, because that's obviously like a global scale. But there's definitely like, yeah, definitely kind of a lack of that there, and that could be due to just, I don't know, people already have stigmas about um those fields in general, but
Mm.
like it it definitely does need more of that love for sure. No, that's a really good take. Sorry, I keep saying that, but no, that's really insightful. Thank you. And and I guess just as a little final, I guess before we close it off, is there any advice you would give to anyone, prospective student who is considering pursuing engineering as a career, maybe more specifically CS, based on your personal experience? And like, how do you think they will be able to overcome the information boundary successfully? And kind of what are some ways that you were able to do this yourself when you were transitioning into college?
Um, that's a really good question. I think that, specifically with CS and engineering in general, it's really easy to get caught up in this workflow or just like do more, do more, do more, and that kind of
Mhm.
mentality. I think that engineering can get really competitive. And I think that again, just building a relationship with what you do that makes it enjoyable for you. So, for example, like, I'm computer science, and there's a lot of pieces of it that, are really difficult and are really boring. And I'm for sure not the quickest to understand a topic in a class, but to say,
Same.
okay, I really enjoy making video games, or I've actually like, um, had a lot of fun working on these like projects that are specific to me and looking at, okay, working with data that's environmental and being able to manipulate that. And I think that that has helped me develop a better relationship with my major, if that makes sense, than just the competition and the grind. And I think that that is applicable for most other fields of engineering is figure out, okay, what about it do you love and do that. And then the rest of that will follow, follow,
Yeah,
follow.
for sure. No, that's great. Thank you so much. And I think that is all from me. Did you have any final closing remarks before we end it?
Think I said everything that immediately came to mind, but I mean, I truly think that for when it comes to journalism and when it comes to communication, the barrier to entry is so low. I mean, I joined the nucleus and I basically rant 600 words about whatever I care about that week, and it's so much fun to just talk, like write about what makes me excited.
For
And
sure.
I think that writing in general or being able, anybody who wants to write is able to and should write and communicate, well, what is it about the world that excites them, and they'll find people that follow that or that agree.
Absolutely. No, yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Again, you were awesome. You were amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, of course. And yeah, I think that's it. I think we're good.
And we're back. Thank you, Keilani, for that lovely episode. I think it's awesome to see an engineer that's so involved with the soft skill side of engineering, with all the communications, all the journalism. I feel like not a lot of people think about that. Like they think of
Right.
engineers as like people that don't know how to communicate. They're
For
just
sure.
holed up behind their desk.
For sure. And it's funny too, because as someone who's doing computer science and business admin, you really do get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And it's all just as important as your technical skills too. They're all really necessary. But it's really great and easy to get access to them at all times.
How
So,
have you
yeah.
found bridging the gap between journalism and engineering in your USC life?
I found that it was actually a lot easier than I originally thought, because I knew that I wanted to do some degree of engineering here on campus. I knew of the Daily Trojan. I joined it last semester, and I knew that was something that I really wanted to do, even though I wasn't exactly involved in engineering in journalism in high school. But because of USC's great resources and stuff, especially with the Daily Trojan and Annenberg Media, I knew I wanted to get involved there. And then the science and math-based student publication that I found called The Nucleus here on campus, which I discovered this semester, definitely made it a lot easier for me too, because I didn't have to look that hard to find that it existed, because there were already more than enough people, yet still too few who care about this issue as much as I do. So the resources here are great, and yeah, definitely made it easier to bridge that gap for sure.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people get scared about bridging all of their interests once they get to a campus like USC, because they kind of feel like they're going to be caged into whatever major they choose.
Absolutely.
But you can honestly explore whatever interest
It's
major
still
you want.
doable, yeah, and you can somehow find a way to merge it with whatever engineering you're
Yeah.
doing, or whatever it is that you're doing, really. There's always a way.
Yeah.
Even if it's like something you wouldn't expect or like unconventional, there is some association with it. That's great.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that lovely episode. We will see you guys next week with another episode, and Paul will hopefully be back with us. So we look forward to seeing you next Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.
Bye, thank you.